The final book which I want to show you as part of this spotlight session goes back to the more factual side. This is another personal history of the Civil War, and this is one which has a very local connection. So this is the memoirs of the late Colonel Hutchinson, Governor of Nottingham Castle during the war, and was written by his wife, Lucy Hutchinson. So this book, we have a few different versions of this as well. This particular copy in this rather nice marbled cover with the half vellum binding is part of the James Ward collection. Now, I've mentioned the James Ward collection a number of times during these spotlight sessions. James Ward was a local collector and bibliophile, and he donated to Bromley House all of his local history books in 1904. So this book is his copy of the life of Colonel Hutchinson. In the front, there are some reviews of the book that have been copied out, handwritten, onto this front page, saying how good this book is, and it's quite nice to have those in the front there as well, together with this little dedication from 1831. And when we get to the book itself, there we have a nice portrait on the frontispiece of Colonel Hutchinson. So, Colonel John Hutchinson lived from 1615 to 1664, and his family seat was Owthorpe Hall in Nottinghamshire. His father, Sir Thomas Hutchinson, was a royalist, and he represented Nottinghamshire in the Long Parliament before the Civil War. His son John, however, was a Puritan and was a parliamentarian. So one can imagine that there was presumably some conflict within the family about this. John Hutchinson got a commission in the regiment raised by Colonel Francis Pierpoint and was part of the parliamentary committee for Nottingham. In 1643, during the Civil War, he took command of Nottingham Castle, and he was later appointed by Parliament as the governor of the town and castle of Nottingham. So he struggled for the defence of the city against the royalist forces. All of this is detailed within the memoirs written by his wife. And in 1646, he was elected as an MP for Nottingham. He was very politically active during the war. After the war, he maintained a hand in politics, but it seems that he wasn't maybe quite so active once the war itself had finished. He was made the High Sheriff of Nottingham in 1659, but after the Restoration, his position became uncertain. He had actually been one of the people who was a signatory of Charles I's death warrant. So after the Restoration, many of the people who signed the death warrant were executed as traitors. Colonel Hutchinson was not. He was not actually executed, unlike most of the regicides, but he was banned from holding any public office, partly due to his professed repentance of the act of having signed the death warrant. He kind of retired from public life at that point. However, in 1663, he was arrested on suspicion of involvement in the Farnley Wood plot against the restored monarchy, and he was imprisoned in the Tower of London, then transferred to Sandown Castle in Kent. Whilst he was in prison, he caught a fever and he died, so he didn't actually come to trial for this. And subsequent historians have suggested that it's a little bit spurious that he had anything much to do with the Farnley Wood plot, and may have just been a way of kind of getting him out of public life. So this biography of him was written by his widow, by Lucy. She wrote it for her private use. It was not intended to be something that she published, and it wasn't actually published until 1806, when one of her descendants, the Reverend Julius Hutchinson, edited it and wrote a preface and then published it. So as I say, we have a number of copies of this in the collection. This is a rather nice copy, and has information about how the documents came to the descendant who got them published. It also includes, as well as Lucy Hutchinson's biography of her husband, it includes a short fragment about herself and about her own life. So this is It was not as it was not intended to be a public document. It was something that she seems to have written for her own sake and for her family. It is quite a bit more personal than a lot of other histories are. It was not written as a history of the war. It was more written as a memorial of her husband, who he was, how he reacted to things, the deeds that he did. And as such, it gives a really interesting slant on the massive political events that happened to be happening at the same time as these two people were, living out their married life. The additional interest, of course, for us is that it's local. So she's talking about Nottingham and Nottinghamshire and how the Civil War and all the political manoeuvring that happened before, during and after that, how that affected the local area and the locality. So it's a really interesting book, and as I say, we have a number of different copies of it in the library. This is a rather nice one, but there are others as well. So this particular copy isn't available to be borrowed, but it can be viewed, but we have other copies as well which you can borrow. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this quick run through some of the older books in the collection that deal with the history of the Civil War period. Next month, Sally is going to be doing the spotlight session, and she's going to be looking at the Alan Sillitoe collection, which is entirely different from the old books about the Civil War. So thank you, and hopefully you'll watch the next one too.